India has slammed Bangladesh's comments on the Murshidabad violence. Murshidabad has seen violence in the last few days. Things have now returned to normal. Calm has returned, but normalcy is yet to return actually, given the fact that there is still a lot of security deployment there. Security has been deployed for the protection of those who came under attack. The matter went to court. It was discussed in court. The court decided that the security will remain so that those who come under attack are not faced with a situation that these attacks repeat themselves. That is what has happened in Murshidabad after the violence. Now, in Bangladesh, minorities have been facing attacks, and this continues. Minorities, especially the Hindu community in Bangladesh, have continued to face attacks, and this is something that India has raised on multiple occasions with the Bangladeshi government. The latest where it has been raised is the one-on-one meeting between Prime Minister Modi and the chief advisor to the interim government in Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus. India has consistently been raising the issue of protection of minorities with Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh also commented on the Murshidabad violence, reacting to allegations from certain quarters that miscreants from Bangladesh could have slipped across the border into India and committed these acts of arson, vandalism and violence. Now, responding to that, the press secretary to the chief advisor of the interim government of Bangladesh, Shafiqul Alam, said this was not true, and of course he denied this had happened. But he went on to say that India's attempts to involve Bangladesh in communal violence in Murshidabad, West Bengal, is something that Bangladesh was strongly protesting against, and then added, we strongly refute any attempts to implicate Bangladesh in the communal violence in Murshidabad. We urge the government of India and West Bengal to take all steps fully to protect the minority Muslim population. Now, one of the things to note here, and why India has reacted so sharply, is that the pattern of the violence and who is the victim. Murshidabad is a bordering state with Bangladesh, and in Murshidabad, again, the community that has faced violence is the same community that faces violence in Bangladesh. The Hindu community in Bangladesh is a minority, and they have been subjected to repeated attacks by radicals. Radicals have been emboldened. In fact, even those with terror links, like the founder of the Ansarullah Bangla team, have been released from prison in Bangladesh, thereby emboldening radicals. Now, this is something that India has consistently raised with Bangladesh, especially Prime Minister Modi in his meeting with the chief advisor of the interim government in Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus, raised it directly. Now, this is something that, like I said, India has stated that minorities have to be protected, which is why when Bangladesh responds or Bangladesh says something like this, the situation in the two countries is very different. There is rule of law. On the other hand, the radicals seem to be getting away there, emboldened. Here, the High Court has stepped in as far as violence is concerned. And as far as the protests are concerned, the Muslim community hasn't really faced the protests there. In fact, that is where perhaps that comment is also factually incorrect, where the press secretary says that these protests, Bangladesh has nothing to do with it, but where he goes on to add that we urge the government of India and West Bengal to take all steps to fully protect the minority Muslim population. Now, it is of course a sensible statement to make, but in this context, it may be erroneous. And also, what has happened here in Murshidabad is that already steps have been taken. There is central security, there is police presence, the violence has been brought under control. All of that has happened, which is why India has reacted very sharply, and India has said it in very strong words. They have said these comments are unwarranted, and it's a strong rebuff from the Ministry of External Affairs in India. The spokesperson for the Ministry of External Affairs in India, Randhir Jaiswal, said that this is a barely disguised and disingenuous attempt to draw a parallel with India's concerns over the ongoing persecution of minorities in Bangladesh, where criminal perpetrators of such acts continue to roam free. Instead of making unwarranted comments and indulging in virtue signaling, Bangladesh would do better to focus on protecting the rights of its own minorities. So, a very strong statement from the MEA in India, putting it in context that this is a disingenuous attempt to draw a parallel. Because, like I mentioned, the situations, the way it has been dealt with are very different. And also, what we know is that all of this comes in the backdrop of what's largely been playing out. The persecution of minorities has received global attention. And perhaps Bangladesh is, as many experts would believe, trying to deflect some of the attention from that, which is why they're trying to draw parallels, as the MEA perhaps said. And that is why this is something that has led to a sharp response from the MEA, exposing the inaccuracies and calling the comments unwarranted. And this is something that we will perhaps also notice that the India-Bangladesh relationship hasn't been all that great in the past few months. You know, Mohammad Yunus, the chief advisor, made a comment that India took sharp objection to about India's northeast being landlocked and inviting China to expand its presence, calling Bangladesh the guardian of the ocean. Then, of course, India withdrew transshipment facility for Bangladesh. Bangladesh stopped the import of yarn from India. And now this comment from Shafiqul Alam, the press secretary to the chief advisor of the interim government in Bangladesh. So, this is another chapter in a series of events. The Bangladesh-India relationship clearly strained, but this one has drawn a sharp reaction from the MEA, given that the statement is also not only factually incorrect, but also the fact is that this is what the MEA describes as an attempt to indulge in virtue signaling and calls it barely disguised. So that's the strong response from India as far as this particular comment from Bangladesh is concerned. Thank you so much for watching this video. For more such videos where we bring you the news, go beyond the headlines and give you the context in which it is taking place, stay tuned to NDTV's YouTube platform. Thank you so much for watching. For all the news and updates, stay tuned to NDTV.